Today we are going to embody our vision and mission statement in terms of finding ways that we can inform and educate, inspire, and call to action on the issue of poverty. I've invited Sara Napier. Sara and Robert have been part of our congregation for some time. And Sara is the CEO of United Way Halifax, and she has been in the paper a few times and on the news around talking about a poverty strategy, poverty solution strategy in partnership with HRM. And it's quite an exciting process that's been happening, but it is part of a long journey. And I invited Sara to come and to speak to us about that strategy and just how faith connects. So in terms of informing us, inspiring us, and I've even asked her to call us to action. So Sara, welcome.
Good morning. It's an honor to be with you in this capacity this morning, and it's my first time behind a pulpit. So bear with me, I'm trying to get my bearings. But certainly Grace United has been very good to my husband and I since we've started coming and joining the congregation in the summer of last year, and it is an honor for me to be with you in this way. Thank you. Poverty is not an accident. Like slavery and apartheid, it is man-made and can be removed by the actions of human beings. Some beautiful and powerful words from Nelson Mandela, and powerful words that bring hope for a new way of thinking, that poverty is not inevitable. Poverty is actually not welcomed in our community, and it can be removed by the actions of human beings. So you wonder if this statement is relevant in a community like Halifax Regional Municipality, a community that it could be argued has many pockets of prosperity. And it is indeed relevant in Halifax. We're synced up really well, thank you. So what does poverty look like in Halifax? I want to tell you a little bit about some numbers and some information that help to paint a picture, again, when we know that we have a community of such blessing. In Halifax Regional Municipality, there are over 58,000 people living below the low-income measure. Poverty, as you might imagine, is greater in our municipality among racially visible populations, at a rate of 35% compared to 14% of the overall population. Some neighborhoods in HRM have childhood poverty rates of 48 to 49%. Those neighborhoods include Dartmouth North, Spryfield, and Fairview is not far behind. 50% of young people aged 15 to 29 who are living on their own cannot afford to meet their basic needs. And there's a huge population of working poor in our community. 28% of the labor force is earning under $15 an hour. So you can imagine that leads to a lot of precarious employment, managing many different positions, doing your best to support your family. And when we think about those on low-income assistance, over 60% of those individuals have a disability or a short-term illness, which really says a powerful statement about our need for more inclusion in our community. So in my view, and I think in the view of many others, we have a moral crisis on our hands. And it's something that, as Stephen spoke about, it requires a real collective action to do something about it. And this reminds me of some words from Dante, and those words are, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crises maintain their neutrality." So that's a dramatic comment, but it's one that I think points to the fact that we need to have an opinion about poverty, and we need to act. So what does all of this mean for the people of Grace United Church? People who already have hearts to help others and do so generously and with great impact. I'll offer a few reflections. First is a verse that I think can speak powerfully to the work and the task ahead for us. And it's from 1 Corinthians 16, 13 and 14. Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous, be strong, do everything in love. A few Sundays ago, Stephen spoke with us about all of us needing to be vessels of God's love. He also spoke about the importance of demonstrating and living moral leadership. Sometimes this can be difficult. Doing what is right is not always what is popular. And Stephen said in that capacity that to walk the way of the cross is to know it will provoke the powers against us. I may be paraphrasing a little bit, Stephen. But I believe all of this points to a truth, and it's a truth that we must do our best to live in courage and in love. And living in courage and in love means standing up and giving voice to what needs to change in our community, including loving the most marginalized with all of our hearts, and breaking down the stigma that those who are most marginalized so often experience. So as Stephen said, I'm here as a new member of Grace United Church, and I'm also honored to be the CEO of United Way Halifax. And my heart and my work are very closely aligned. And I'm truly humbled to share with you a little bit about how United Way Halifax and the municipality are working together to create a poverty report and a plan ahead that really sees a role for everyone in our community being involved, including everyone here at Grace United. The image that you see on the screen is the cover of a report that will soon be released. We'll actually be going to council in March, just next month, to report back on what we heard over this process of compiling this report. And as Stephen said, it's a long journey ahead. This is one point in that journey. And the report itself provides a detailed analysis of what does poverty look like in Halifax. It provides comments on the economic argument to solve poverty, the social justice argument to solve poverty, the equity components of poverty. And then it goes into talking about several ideas for action that have been generated through community conversation. And when I say several, it's actually 129. So that might be a bit of an underestimation of the word several. But I think that speaks to some incredible energy in our community that came together to say, this is what it's going to take to solve poverty, and let's think ambitiously, not only on poverty alleviation, but poverty eradication. We have to be looking boldly in order to really drive some change. And the report itself, in terms of those ideas for action, there are several categories that they fall into in terms of theme areas. Quality jobs and livable incomes, transportation, food security, homelessness and housing services, access for health and well-being, education and learning, and systemic change. And all of these ideas for action are really designed to move the needle and address those numbers that I shared with you just a few moments ago. And this work started not that long ago, but it certainly builds on a huge amount of work that's been happening from advocates and people in our community for decades and decades. This specific work started last spring, and it's being led by an overall steering committee co-chaired by Mayor Mike Savage and myself. And we've had the honor of bringing together lots of voices through all of this work. In fact, so far we've heard from, to be precise, 1,139 people who have shared their experiences and their ideas and their reflections. And that's come to light in many different ways. We've had several groups meeting together, focus groups, 13 focus groups, representing different cultural communities or geographic communities. We've had task teams really trying to dig into these themes and saying, what does it look like to have a different kind of community, and what does our ideal community look like? We've brought together a business alliance, so knowing that when poverty is something that's so all-encompassing, the business community needs to have ownership of solutions as well. So we brought together business leaders to be a part of this work, and that's been very exciting. We've had some community gatherings, we've done some online surveying, and we've also worked really hard to engage individuals with lived experience in poverty. And that's been critical, obviously, because you have to base the work on people who have the closest understanding of the reality of living in poverty. And to do this and to honor those individuals, we paid a living wage to support their involvement in focus groups. So as a gesture and as an indicator that your work and your opinion is just as valuable as everyone else's, and we need you to guide us to make sure that we're doing the right things for this community. So even though the report is yet to come, and we have learned a great deal, and I urge you to read the report when it's released, and I'll make sure that we find ways to share it with you. I think March 8th might be the date. It's still a bit of a moving target. I wanted to share just a couple of things in the interim. And one comment in particular that really struck me from the feedback that came out of some of our consultations. And that comment is, as someone described, what does my ideal community look like? What is an ideal community? And depending on your worldview, that could be many, many different things. For this individual, he said, my ideal community means that everyone has a choice where to live, what to eat, and how to live their life. Sounds like a pretty basic ideal in many respects, but I think it puts into perspective that that is not within reach for a lot of people in Halifax. And that could go back to the 58,000 plus people that I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks. The other piece that's so critical from the work is that it was clear, it was overwhelmingly clear from all of our comments, all of our conversations, all of our research, that all of the respondents said it's going to take all of us. And by all of us, we mean all orders of government, business, nonprofit, faith communities, spiritual groups, and individuals. It's a complex problem. And this also reminds me of something that Stephen just spoke about last week, so I'm hope that I'm going to represent this well. He quoted Desmond Tutu when he talked about that we were all placed on earth for the complementarity of all peoples. And when you think about it, it's that importance of, this applies in this case, let's bring together our differences to improve something that is much bigger than any of us. So what's next? Just a few details on what's next. So this again is a point in time. The report will be published in the coming weeks. We as United Way Halifax will continue to hold this report because it's really critical. You often have the cliched statement of another report is going to go sit on a shelf, and we're not going to let that happen. And we hope that you will hold us account to not let that happen as well by being involved with us. We're going to continue community engagement, continue conversations. And this work is constantly evolving, and we want to make sure that it stays really current with what our community needs. Some of the next steps of these 129 ideas for action is then looking at alignment of who are the right partners to carry them forward. Can the ideas, what else needs to happen from an evaluation perspective on each of these ideas? What's the action plan? What's the implementation? What's the financial scenarios that we have to be thinking about? So all of that work is coming in the next step. And so what I believe is that we have to have faith and work diligently and with courage to create the art of the possible by bringing all of these ideas to life. And it's certainly going to take a lot of work. So when we think about the art of the possible, and I've said to a few people before, I don't often quote Machiavelli. I think this is the only quote I ever do quote. Because I think it's critical to think about this perspective that as we work together on the art of the possible, we need to acknowledge that this is going to be really, really, really difficult, but that does not mean it's not worth trying. So the quote, I'll just read it briefly. "There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things." So when you think about looking at poverty in our community, we as a community, and I mean the greater we are indeed aiming to lead the introduction of a new order of things. We're looking at changing our community for the better for everyone. And what does that look like? Ideally, that's a community without poverty, more hope, and led by love. So I strongly believe this will be difficult, but it's not impossible. And it's important to distinguish between difficult and impossible. I know that all of you as Grace United Church already contribute and care in so many ways. And I love this about Grace United. I think it's what Robert and I felt from the first time that we came, that there's a warmth and a special spirit here that is undeniable. So let's talk about what we need to keep on doing, and maybe doing it with even more vigor than we have before. First, let's love our community wholeheartedly. Let's not be immune to the issues that need to be addressed. We have to understand and advocate for the fact that our community may have pockets of prosperity, but we also must acknowledge that it is not prosperous until everyone has the opportunity to contribute and to benefit from the greater good. 2, let's stand up for change. Although, as we've talked about, we all know our community has amazing strengths, there are many, many, many people living in the shadows, and we shared some of that information this morning. So I ask you to continue to be a voice, and again, even with more rigor, a voice for humanity, and ensure that your thinking and your heart focuses on empathy, embracing each individual's story and needs. Be vocal and be strong. Your voice truly matters. 3rd, let's be kind and love others every day. Remember that everyone is fighting their own battle. Show love, compassion, and kindness to everyone you meet without exception. A smile, eye contact, and acts of empathy matter more than sometimes we can ever realize. And 4th, let's really think, what else can I do? What else can I do to help solve critical issues in my community? What talents can I bring? Let's challenge ourselves to do more and be more. And as Mother Teresa said, I'm quoting all kinds of, no one really special, right? Just Mother Teresa. Never worry about the numbers. Help one person at a time, and always start with the person nearest you. And I love that comment because that means we can all do something very tangible in our everyday, as well as focus on the big picture and contribute to the report and the systems change that we know needs to happen in our community. So thank you for focusing your hearts outwardly on others, and for being resolute in the need for all of us to be united to truly create change in our community. And community change that is truly everlasting requires all of us. Your love for others matters. For me, God is love, and love is God. Nothing is impossible with love. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah is more than willing to engage in conversation about this subject that really radiates from your heart and your being. So thank you for that. And invite you to continue to engage in that conversation. We will be hosting sometime in May a forum and a conversation that continues on this, but it will be around a living wage and guaranteed income and some other things. Details will be coming out about that, but that is part of our ongoing intention to talk, and not just talk, to act on some of these issues. So more details will come about that, but thank you so much, Sara. And Sara, as I said, is more than willing to engage you in conversation.